The sun hadn't yet broken over the Arizona desert when Sarah Mendez walked into the briefing room at Forward Operating Base Sentinel. She carried her tablet and a worn leather notebook. Her boots were dusty but polished. Her uniform was crisp. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. She was 32 years old. She had served her country for nearly a decade. And still, when she entered that room, the men barely looked up. "Coffee's in the back, sweetheart," one of them said without even turning around. Sarah didn't respond. She'd heard worse. She took her seat at the far end of the table. The chair was smaller than the others. It had been placed there almost as an afterthought. Because that's what she was to most of them, an afterthought. A necessity, but not a soldier, just a translator. The base commander, Colonel Hayes, entered the room with heavy steps. He was a man in his 50s with gray stubble and eyes that had seen too many deployments. He dropped a file on the table. "Listen up," he said. "We've got movement near the southern ridge. Intelligence says a cartel convoy is pushing product through the canyon route. We're running a joint training op with Border Patrol at 0500 tomorrow. Full tactical exercise, live surveillance. No engagement unless fired upon." The men around the table nodded. These were hardened soldiers, rangers, special forces instructors. Men who had seen combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. Men who wore their scars like badges. Then Hayes looked at Sarah. "Mendez, you'll be on comms. Translation only. If we intercept radio chatter in Spanish, we need real-time intel. You stay in the vehicle. Understood?" "Understood, sir," Sarah said quietly. One of the men, Staff Sergeant Kowalski, let out a low chuckle. He was a thick-shouldered man with a shaved head and a permanent smirk. "Good," he said. "Wouldn't want our translator getting her hands dirty." A few others laughed. Sarah felt the heat rise in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. She had learned long ago that reacting only made it worse. "She's probably never even fired her weapon outside of qualifications," another man muttered. His name was Briggs. He was younger, arrogant, the kind of soldier who thought combat was the only thing that mattered. "That's enough," Hayes said, but his tone was tired, like he'd said it 100 times before and didn't really mean it. The briefing continued. Maps were spread out. Routes were discussed. Roles were assigned. And through it all, Sarah sat quietly, taking notes, listening, watching, because that's what she did. She watched. She listened. She learned. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sarah Mendez had once been more than a translator. Years ago, before she transferred to this dusty outpost in the middle of nowhere, she had been part of a specialized unit, a unit that didn't officially exist, a unit that operated in the shadows of the drug war along the border. She had run infiltration missions. She had coordinated raids. She had pulled a trigger when it mattered, but then something had happened, something she didn't talk about. Something that had ended with her best friend in a body bag and Sarah behind a desk. She had requested the transfer herself. She had asked to step back, to be just a translator, to fade into the background, because it was easier that way, because it hurt less. But the men at this base didn't know any of that. They saw her language skills on a file. They saw a woman who didn't brag or boast, a woman who stayed quiet, and they assumed she was soft. They assumed she couldn't fight. The briefing ended. The men filed out, laughing and slapping each other on the back. Sarah stayed behind. She closed her notebook. She took a slow breath. Colonel Hayes lingered by the door. "You good, Mendez?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment. There was something in his eyes. Maybe respect, maybe pity. She couldn't tell. "They don't mean anything by it," he said. "I know, sir," but she didn't know. And it did mean something. Every joke, every dismissive glance, every time they treated her like she didn't belong, it meant they didn't see her. And maybe that was her fault. Maybe she had hidden herself too well. Hayes left. Sarah sat alone in the empty briefing room. The sun was starting to rise outside. Long shadows stretched across the desert floor. She thought about the mission tomorrow. A simple training op, low risk, high routine, but something felt wrong. She had learned to trust that feeling. It was a whisper in the back of her mind, a tightness in her gut, the kind of instinct you develop when you've lived on the edge. She pulled out her tablet and reviewed the mission parameters again. The route, the timing, the terrain. The canyon was a choke point, narrow, surrounded by high rock walls. If something went wrong there, If they were caught in the open, there would be no easy way out. She made a note to double-check the gear manifest, to make sure the medical supplies were packed, to verify the radio frequencies, because if her instincts were right, tomorrow wouldn't be a training op, it would be a test, and not the kind anyone was prepared for. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. The base was quiet except for the hum of generators and the distant sound of coyotes. She thought about the men she would be riding with tomorrow. Men who thought she was weak. Men who would never trust her to have their backs. But if it came down to it, if the bullets started flying, would they trust her then? Or would they still see her as just a translator? She didn't know. But she had a feeling she was about to find out. The alarm went off at 0400. Sarah was already awake. She had been dressed and ready for 20 minutes. Old habits. She grabbed her gear and headed to the motor pool. The air was cold, the kind of desert cold that bites at your skin before the sun comes up and bakes everything dry. The convoy vehicles were lined up. 3 armored Humvees. The men were loading equipment, checking weapons. Their breath came out in clouds of steam. Sarah approached the second vehicle. That's where she'd been assigned. Middle of the convoy, safest position. Of course, Kowalski was already there, loading ammunition crates. He saw her and shook his head. "You bring everything you need?" he asked. "Lipstick? Hairspray?" The other men laughed. Sarah dropped her pack into the vehicle. "Just my gear, Sergeant." "Good. Wouldn't want you slowing us down." She bit her tongue. Again. Briggs walked over holding a rifle. "Hey, Mendez, you even know how to use that?" He pointed at the M4 slung across her back. "I qualified," Sarah said simply. "Qualifying on a range isn't the same as the real thing," Briggs said. He leaned in closer. "Out there, when people are shooting back, it's different. It freezes people, especially people who aren't built for it." Sarah met his eyes. "I'll keep that in mind. I'm serious," he continued. "If something happens, you stay down. You stay out of the way. Let the real soldiers handle it." Real soldiers. The words hit harder than she expected, but she didn't let it show. "Understood," she said. Colonel Hayes arrived in his command vehicle. He stepped out with a clipboard and a thermos of coffee. He looked tired, like he'd slept even less than Sarah. "Mount up," he called out. "We roll in 5. The men climbed into the vehicles. Sarah took her position in the back seat of the second Humvee. Kowalski drove. Briggs sat in the front passenger seat. A younger soldier named Martinez manned the turret gun on top. The radio crackled to life. Hayes' voice came through. "Comms check. Sound off." One by one, the vehicles reported in. When it came to Sarah's vehicle, Kowalski grabbed the handset. "Victor 2, all clear." He didn't even ask Sarah to do it, because in his mind, she wasn't really part of the team. She was cargo, equipment, a tool they might need. The convoy rolled out. The headlights cut through the darkness. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. Sarah put on her headset and tuned into the frequency they'd been given. She would monitor radio traffic, listen for Spanish transmissions, translate if needed. But she also tuned into 2 other frequencies, ones that weren't on the official list. Cartel frequencies she'd memorized from her old unit, channels the intelligence reports sometimes missed, because if something was out there, she wanted to hear it first. The drive took 40 minutes. The sky began to lighten. Dawn was coming. The canyon came into view, a long, narrow passage between 2 ridges of red rock. It was beautiful. And it was a perfect kill zone. Sarah felt that tightness in her gut again. Stronger this time, she leaned forward. "Sergeant, we should slow down. This terrain is—" "I've driven through this canyon a dozen times, Mendez," Kowalski interrupted. "I don't need a translator to tell me how to do my job." Sarah sat back. She looked out the window, scanning the ridgelines, searching for anything out of place. The convoy entered the canyon. The rock walls rose high on both sides. The road narrowed. There was only one way forward. One way back. Sarah's hand drifted to her rifle. Briggs noticed. "Relax," he said. "This is just a training run. Nothing's going to happen." But Sarah had heard that before. She'd heard it the day her best friend died. The day everything changed. They were halfway through the canyon when Sarah heard it. A voice on one of the cartel frequencies, faint, crackling, speaking. "Rápido Spanish, en posición, esperando. 3. Vehiculos in position waiting 3. Vehicles. Her blood went cold. Stop the convoy, Sarah said sharply. Kowalski glanced at her in the rearview mirror. What? Stop the convoy now, we're being watched. Watched? By who? I'm hearing chatter on a cartel frequency. They know we're here. They know we have 3 vehicles. We need to turn back. Briggs turned around in his seat. You're hearing things. Intel said this area was clear. Intel was wrong, Sarah said. Her voice was firm now, urgent. We need to alert the colonel and get out of this canyon. Kowalski shook his head. You're paranoid. There's nothing out here. I'm telling you to calm down, Kowalski snapped. You're spooking yourself. This is why desk jockeys shouldn't be in the field. Sarah reached for the radio handset. If they wouldn't listen, she'd go straight to Hayes. But before she could key the mic, the world exploded. The lead vehicle erupted in a ball of fire. The blast was deafening. Metal twisted. Glass shattered. The shockwave rocked Sarah's Humvee IED. Martinez screamed from the turret. Then the gunfire started. It came from both sides of the canyon. Muzzle flashes lit up the ridge lines. Bullets hammered into the vehicles like hail on a tin roof. The windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. Kowalski slammed on the brakes. Contact! We're taking fire! Briggs grabbed the radio. Victor 1 is hit. We're under attack. Sarah's training took over. Instinct, muscle memory. The things you never forget no matter how long you've been away. She checked her rifle. Chamber loaded. Safety off, we need to return fire. She shouted. Stay down. Briggs yelled at her. We've got this. But they didn't have it. Sarah could see that immediately. The lead vehicle was destroyed. Flames poured from the wreckage. The third vehicle was trying to reverse, but the road was too narrow. They were pinned, trapped. Exactly what she'd been afraid of. Martinez fired the turret gun wildly. Brass casings rained down into the vehicle. But he was shooting blind, panicking, wasting ammunition. Martinez, short controlled burst, Sarah shouted. Conserve your ammo. But he couldn't hear her over the chaos. A bullet punched through the door next to Sarah's head. She threw herself to the floor. Kowalski was on the radio screaming for backup. Briggs was trying to load a magazine with shaking hands. He'd dropped one. Rounds scattered across the floor. This was falling apart. Fast. Sarah knew what happened next. She'd seen it before. When soldiers panicked, when training failed, when everything went wrong, people died. She thought about staying down, about doing what they told her, about being just a translator. But then she heard it, a scream from the lead vehicle. Someone was still alive in there, burning. And in that moment, Sarah made a choice. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She kicked open the door and rolled out into the dirt. Mendez, what are you doing? Kowalski screamed, but Sarah was already moving. The bullets kicked up dirt around Sarah's boots as she ran. She kept low, zigzagging, moving toward the burning lead vehicle. The gunfire was coming from elevated positions on both ridges. At least a dozen shooters, maybe more. They had the high ground. They had the advantage. They had planned this perfectly, but they didn't know about Sarah. She reached the cover of a boulder and pressed her back against it. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She'd been here before. Different desert. Different enemy, same fear, same focus. She keyed her radio. Victor 1, this is Mendez. Anyone alive in there? Static, then a weak voice. Help can't move, and it was Lieutenant Chen, the vehicle commander. He was trapped. Sarah looked at the burning Humvee. Flames were spreading. Smoke poured from the engine. If the fuel tank went, anyone inside would be vaporized. She had maybe 2 minutes. She scanned the ridgeline, found the nearest muzzle flash, calculated the angle, adjusted for distance and wind. Then she fired 3 rounds. Quick, precise. The muzzle flash stopped. Sarah didn't wait to confirm the kill. She was already moving. She sprinted to the lead vehicle. The heat from the flames was intense. The metal was hot enough to burn skin. The passenger door was crumpled. Jammed shut, she grabbed the handle anyway. Pulled hard. It didn't budge. Chen, where are you hit? Leg, pinned, can't get out. Sarah ran to the other side of the vehicle. Bullets stitched the ground behind her. She didn't stop. Stopping meant dying. The driver's side door was blown open. The driver was dead, slumped over the wheel. Sarah forced herself not to look at his face. Chen was in the back, His leg was crushed under a collapsed seat. Blood pooled beneath him. His face was pale. Shock was setting in. "I've got you," Sarah said. She climbed inside. The smoke was thick, choking. The heat was unbearable. She pulled her knife and cut Chen's belt. Then she grabbed the collapsed seat and lifted. It was heavy. Her muscles screamed. But she'd lifted heavier. She'd done harder. "Pull yourself out," she shouted. Chen gritted his teeth and dragged himself backward. His leg came free. He screamed in pain, but he was moving. Sarah grabbed him under the arms and hauled him out of the vehicle. They fell together into the dirt. She didn't stop. She grabbed his vest and dragged him behind, covered just as another burst of gunfire ripped through the space where they'd been. "Stay down," she told Chen. She pulled a tourniquet from her kit and wrapped his leg tight, professional fast. You came for me?" Chen gasped. "Save your breath," Sarah said. She got back on the radio. "Victor 1 commander is secure. He needs medevac."
"How's everyone else?"
Kowalski's voice came back, strained, scared. "We're pinned down. We can't move." "Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" Sarah ignored the question. "Victor 3 status?" The third vehicle responded. "We're intact, but we can't back out. The road's blocked by debris." Sarah assessed the situation. They were stuck in the canyon. The enemy had them in a crossfire. Backup was at least 20 minutes away, maybe more. If they stayed here, they would die. She needed to change the equation. She looked up at the ridgelines. The shooters were spread out, covering different angles, but they were focusing their fire on the vehicles. They thought the Americans would stay buttoned up, wait for rescue. They weren't expecting anyone to push back. Sarah keyed the radio. "All units, this is Mendez. I'm going to suppress the North Ridge. When I do, Victor 2 and 3 lay down cover fire on the South Ridge. We need to split their attention. Who put you in charge?" Briggs shot back. "You want to live? Then listen to me." There was a pause. Then Colonel Hayes's voice cut through. He'd been silent since the ambush started. Now he sounded different, focused. "Do it," Hayes said. Everyone listened to Mendez. "That's an order." Sarah didn't wait for arguments. She moved to a new position, closer to the North Ridge. She found a crack in the rocks that gave her a narrow sight line. She spotted 3 shooters. They were using the rocks for cover. Leaning out, firing, ducking back, amateur tactics. Predictable. Sarah controlled her breathing. She'd trained for this. Years ago. A lifetime ago. With people who had believed in her. Who had trusted her. She fired 1 shot. The first shooter dropped. The others hesitated, confused. They'd lost a man, but they didn't know where the shot came from. Sarah shifted position. Fired again. The second shooter fell. Now they knew. They turned their weapons toward her. Bullets slammed into the rocks around her. Chips of stone cut her face. But she'd bought the convoy precious seconds. Now, she screamed into the radio. Martinez opened up with the turret gun. Briggs and Kowalski leaned out of the Humvee and fired at the South Ridge. The third vehicle joined in. The ambush turned into a firefight. The enemy had numbers. But Sarah's team had training. And now they had direction. Sarah moved again. She'd learned never to fire from the same position twice. She flanked to the left. Found another angle. Took out a 4th shooter. The cartel gunmen started to break. They weren't soldiers. They were criminals. Thugs with guns. When the fight turned against them, their courage evaporated. Sarah saw them retreating. Scrambling up the ridge, running. "They're pulling back," Martinez shouted. But Sarah knew better. This wasn't over. She heard it on the cartel frequency again. A voice barking orders in Spanish. "Traigan el lanzacohetes. Destruyan los vehículos." "Bring the rocket launcher." "Destroy the vehicles." Her blood turned to ice. "RPG," she screamed. "Take cover." The men looked at her like she was crazy. They didn't see anything. But Sarah had learned to trust the intelligence before her eyes saw it. 3 seconds later, a rocket streaked down from the South Ridge. It slammed into the third vehicle. The explosion flipped the Humvee onto its side. Flames erupted. "Get out! Everyone out!" Hayes was shouting. The men from the third vehicle scrambled free. One of them was on fire. Another soldier tackled him and rolled him in the dirt. Put out the flames. Now 2 vehicles were destroyed. Only Sarah's Humvee was still functional, and the enemy knew it. Sarah saw the gunman on the ridge reloading the RPG. He was taking his time. He knew they had nowhere to go. She raised her rifle. The distance was over 300 yards uphill, wind coming from the east. It was an impossible shot, but impossible was something Sarah had stopped believing in a long time ago. She steadied her breathing, calculated, adjusted, and fired. The bullet took the gunman in the chest. He fell backward. The RPG tumbled from his hands and clattered down the rocks. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Kowalski's voice came over the radio. Quiet, stunned. Did she just... 300 yards. Martinez whispered. I saw it. She dropped him at 300 yards. Briggs said nothing. He was staring at Sarah like he'd never seen her before because he hadn't. None of them had. Sarah got back on the radio. Colonel, we need to move now before they regroup. Hayes didn't hesitate. Agreed. Everyone into Victor 2. We're leaving. The survivors ran to Sarah's Humvee. They carried the wounded Chen, 2 men from the 3rd vehicle. A soldier with burns on his arms. They piled in. It was cramped. Too many bodies in too small a space. Kowalski climbed into the driver's seat, but Hayes stopped him. Mendez drives, Hayes said. Kowalski stared. Sir, you heard me. She's gotten us this far. She gets us home. Sarah didn't argue. She slid into the driver's seat. Kowalski moved to the back without a word. She put the Humvee in gear and punched the accelerator. The vehicle lurched forward. They raced through the canyon. Bullets chased them, but they were moving too fast. The enemy fire fell behind. They burst out of the canyon into open desert. The sun was fully up now. The sky was bright and clear. Sarah didn't slow down until they were 5 miles clear. Only then did she let herself breathe. They'd made it. Behind her, the men were silent, processing, realizing. The translator had just saved all their lives. The base came into view 30 minutes later. Medical teams were already waiting. Word had traveled fast. Sarah brought the Humvee to a stop. Before she could even turn off the engine, medics were pulling open the doors. They lifted Chen onto a stretcher, treated the burns, checked everyone for injuries. Sarah sat in the driver's seat. Her hands were still on the wheel. She was covered in dust and blood. None of it was hers. Someone opened her door. It was Colonel Hayes. Mendez, he said quietly. You need to come with me. She nodded. Climbed out. Her legs were shaky now. The adrenaline was wearing off. The crash was coming. Hayes led her toward the command building. Behind her, she could hear the men talking. Their voices were different now, subdued, respectful. Did you see her shoot? 300 yards. 1 shot. She saved Chen, ran right into the fire. Who is she? Sarah kept walking. She didn't look back. Hayes brought her to his office and closed the door. He pointed to a chair. She sat. He poured 2 glasses of water from a pitcher on his desk. Handed her one. Drink, he said. She did. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was. Hayes sat down across from her. He studied her for a long moment. I read your file when you transferred here, he said. The official one. Linguist, translator. 10 years of service. Exemplary record. But nothing about combat experience. Nothing about tactical training. Sarah said nothing. But that wasn't the only file, was it? Hayes continued. After what I saw today, I made some calls. Pulled some strings. Found the other file, the classified one. Sarah's jaw tightened. Hayes leaned forward. You were part of Task Force Shadowline, Joint DEA and Special Operations. Deep cover work along the border, infiltration, direct action against cartel leadership. You ran missions that officially never happened. He paused. And then 3 years ago, an operation went bad. Your team was betrayed. Walked into an ambush. You were the only one who made it out. Your partner, Lieutenant Maria Vasquez, didn't. Sarah closed her eyes. She could still see Maria's face. Still hear her voice on the radio. Still feel the weight of carrying her body back across the desert. After that, you requested a transfer, Hayes said. Asked to be reassigned to translation services. You buried yourself. Stepped back. Became invisible. I didn't want to lead anyone else into danger, Sarah said quietly. I couldn't, not after Maria. So you let them think you were just a translator. It was easier. Hayes sat back. Easier for who? For them or for you? Sarah didn't answer. Hayes stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the base. At the men gathering near the motor pool, word was spreading. The story was already becoming legend. Those men out there spent months treating you like you didn't belong, Hayes said. They dismissed you, mocked you, made you feel small, and you let them. Because you thought you deserved it. Because you were punishing yourself for surviving when Maria didn't. Tears stung Sarah's eyes. She didn't let them fall. But today, Hayes continued, you didn't have a choice. You couldn't hide. And when the moment came, you became who you really are. A warrior, a leader, a soldier who saves lives. He turned to face her. Maria's death wasn't your fault, Mendez. You know that, right? Sarah's voice cracked. I was supposed to check the intel. I was the one who confirmed the location. If I had dug deeper, you were betrayed by someone on the inside, Hayes interrupted. I read the after-action report. The real one? The one that took 2 years to declassify. A cartel informant had infiltrated the intelligence chain. He fed you bad coordinates. You couldn't have known. No one could have. Sarah had heard that before. The investigators had told her. The counselors had told her. But she'd never believed it. Because belief required forgiveness, and she had never forgiven herself. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. Hayes walked back to his desk. He pulled out a folder, placed it in front of her. Because I'm recommending you for the Silver Star, he said. For gallantry in action. For saving Lieutenant Chen's life under fire. For leading the team out of an ambush. For extraordinary heroism. Sarah stared at the folder. Sir, I don't need... It's not about what you need, Hayes said firmly. It's about what you earned. What you deserve. And it's about telling the truth. The real truth. Not the story you've been telling yourself for 3 years. He sat down again. You're also being offered a position, he said. A new task force is being formed. Border security and counter-cartel operations. They need someone with your experience. Your skills. Your instincts. They need a leader. Sarah shook her head. I can't, I'm not ready. You led men through an ambush today. You made decisions under fire. You saved lives. If that's not ready, I don't know what is. They didn't even know who I was. They didn't trust me. They do now. There was a knock on the door. Hayes called out. Enter. The door opened. Kowalski stepped inside. Behind him were Briggs, Martinez, and 3 other soldiers from the convoy. They looked different. Humbled. Changed. Kowalski cleared his throat. Sir, we'd like to speak to Mendez, if that's okay. Hayes looked at Sarah. She nodded. Kowalski stepped forward. The big sergeant who had mocked her that morning now couldn't meet her eyes. We wanted to say... He started, then stopped. Took a breath. We were wrong. About you. About everything. We treated you like you didn't belong. Like you weren't one of us. And today you proved that you're better than all of us. Briggs stepped up. You saved my life. You saved all our lives. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every stupid thing I said. Every joke. Every time I made you feel like you weren't good enough. Martinez spoke next. You're the bravest soldier I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot. What you did today, running into that fire, making that shot, I'll never forget it. One by one, the others echoed the same. Apologies, gratitude, respect. Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest. Something that had been locked tight for 3 years. I was just doing my job, she said. No, Kowalski said. You were being a hero, and we were too blind to see what was right in front of us. Hayes stood. Gentlemen, give us the room. They filed out. Before Kowalski left, he turned back. If you take that task force position, he said, and if you ever need a team, I'd be honored to serve with you. For real this time. Sarah nodded. I'll remember that, Sergeant. The door closed. She was alone with Hayes again, so, he said, what do you say? Are you going to keep hiding? Or are you going to step back into the light? Sarah looked down at the folder, at the recommendation, at the offer. She thought about Maria, about the promise she'd made at her funeral, to never let anyone else die because of her. But maybe she'd misunderstood the promise. Maybe honoring Maria didn't mean stepping back. Maybe it meant stepping up, using her skills, her training, her experience, to save lives, to lead, to fight. Maybe the best way to honor her friend was to be the soldier Maria had always believed she could be. Sarah picked up the folder. When do I start? She asked. Hayes smiled. It was the first time she'd seen him smile. Tomorrow, he said. But today you rest. You've earned it. Sarah stood, shook his hand, and walked out of the office. Outside, the sun was high. The base was buzzing with activity. Soldiers stopped what they were doing when they saw her. Some nodded. Some saluted. Some just stared with newfound respect. She walked across the compound. Her uniform was still dusty. Her face was still dirty. But she walked differently now. Her shoulders were back. Her head was high, because she wasn't just a translator anymore. She was a soldier, a leader, a warrior. She had always been those things. She had just forgotten. But the ambush at dawn had reminded her, and now everyone else knew it too. 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of a new team, 12 men and women, the best of the best, handpicked for the new task force. They looked at her with respect, with trust, with the knowledge that she had been tested and proven. Kowalski was there. He'd requested the transfer. So had Martinez. Even Briggs had applied. Sarah had personally approved him. Because people deserved second chances. She knew that better than anyone. "Listen up," Sarah said. Her voice was strong, clear. "Our mission is simple. We find the cartels. We stop them. We protect the border and the people who live near it. It's dangerous work. Some of you might not come home. But if you're here, it's because you're willing to take that risk. Because you believe it matters." She looked at each of them. "I won't lie to you. I won't sugarcoat it. And I won't let you down. If you trust me, I'll bring you home. That's my promise." They nodded, believed, trusted, because she had earned it. That night, Sarah sat alone in her quarters. On her desk was a photograph, her and Maria, taken years ago, both of them smiling, both of them young and fearless. "I'm back," Sarah whispered to the photo. "I'm finally back." And for the first time in 3 years, she felt at peace. The translator who no one believed could fight had become the leader everyone wanted to follow. Not because she proved them wrong, but because she finally proved herself right.